This episode has been brought to you by JustNForm.com. If you're tired of being censored, tired of having your data stolen and sold, go to JustNForm.com, a social media site where all voices are welcome.
Recently, Tulsi Gabbard's 2020 campaign has become the main topic of conversation for a few reasons. For those of you who do not know who Tulsi Gabbard is, she is the woman who showed a great leap of political evolution during the 2016 campaign. She used to be the vice chair of the DNC, which meant that at one point she was basically Debbie Wasserman Schultz's right-hand woman. And that's not really a small feat to attain, especially with her being from Hawaii, and to be in that position as a woman of color is a big deal. But what was even a little bit more peculiar at the time, which is a lot of us was confused about, I'll be honest with you, I was too. She was up next, to put it, to put it lightly. She was up next. Her campaigns were being funded. She was winning her Hawaii races by a landslide. And although she wasn't the most popular, they were not really pushing anybody as being more popular or better than Hillary Clinton because so many people were in her pockets. But she was on that path to climb the political ladder. And essentially, this announcement would have came in 2024, but she would have been on the establishment wing of the Democratic Party rather than the progressive side if she had not broken off to support Bernie Sanders in 2016. And when she was asked about whether or not she should support Bernie Sanders, or why she should, I should say, she said it was the right thing to do. When I saw how my party treated him, when I saw how my party limited debates, I removed myself from the DNC, which you all know is a big deal. You're ostracizing yourself the moment you decide to do that. You decide to not only support Bernie Sanders, but you continue to critique Hillary Clinton the entire way and refuse to endorse her. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. So that is why then after the election, she went to Syria, right? And then talked to Assad to figure out exactly what was happening in Syria. And she is part of the reason we now know that a lot of what is happening in Syria is the fault of the United States, not Syria. A lot of the armed, quote unquote, armed rebels are terrorists armed by the United States. That we know a lot of that information thanks to Tulsi Gabbard. So when she announced her bid for 2020, I think everybody was pretty excited for the most part, anybody who knows about her extensively. But then questions started being asked, and I believe it is a legitimate question. The question is, well, should Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard run at the same time? Won't that hurt each other? Won't that hurt their chances of winning? Won't they suck delegates away from each other? Won't they suck super delegates away from each other? Won't they suck endorsements away from each other? And there's two answers to that. Yes and no, but mostly yes. Now, unless the rules have changed for the DNC recently, which some of them have, but I don't believe that this has. The role of the superdelegates have changed. However, the roles of the pledged delegates have not. You have to stay in the race as long as humanly possible, or else she does her Bernie Sanders. Now, what do I mean by that? Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders went all the way to the convention. It was kind of what I call a half contested, as in it was contested, but not really. But it was half contested. And what you saw at that convention was that some of the numbers weren't adding up, right? The pledged delegates in this, like they won a certain amount of pledged delegates in that state, whatever it may be, Iowa, Maryland, well, whatever. They won a certain amount of pledged delegates, but for some reason, there were many cases where Bernie Sanders ended up with more pledged delegates than he had before, which is weird, right? And in other cases, Hillary Clinton ended up with a little bit more than she had before. But oftentimes, Hillary Clinton actually ended up with less during the convention. There's a reason for that. So although they are not bound by law to do so, even if you don't contest, really, depending on the state, but even if you don't contest the convention, you can ask your pledged delegates who will vote at the convention to back one particular candidate over the other. That way, if a Kamala Harris or a Cory Booker or a Joe Biden begins to pull away with superdelegates, Tulsi Gabbard being as popular as she is amongst progressives, and I believe she will continue to grow in popularity as people see her evolution. The best way, by the way, to look at that evolution, I encourage you all to go look at her interview with Joe Rogan. Hands down, to me, the best political interview that I've seen by a potential presidential candidate, because it wasn't about her. It was about all of the way we saw things unfold in 2016, her legitimately addressing and being unafraid to talk about election fraud and election justice, her talking about what happened in Syria. It's a fantastic watch, and I believe anyone should watch it, especially if you are an anti-war, pro-peace economy, all for election justice. Definitely go watch that to get to know a little bit more about Tulsi Gabbard. Be careful, by the end of the interview, you might fall in love with her. Just, letting you all know. So, so essentially, with her popularity, I would gather at this very moment, if everything, like if they had the normal amount of debates without like a certain amount of momentum going her way, I believe that Tulsi Gabbard would get about 20 to 25% of the vote. I think that Bernie will get close to 35%. I think Joe Biden will get close to about 30% when it's all said and done. Now, I don't believe that Bernie Sanders, because of the establishment, will get the requisite amount of delegates to make sure that you don't have to go to a contested convention. I don't believe that not because I don't believe in him. It's because I don't believe in the establishment. Even with the superdelegates counting in the middle of a tie, I just don't believe that they'll allow him to do that. Same thing with Tulsi Gabbard. I believe in Tulsi Gabbard. I think that she does have what it takes to win a primary election. Now, especially because she gets to stand up on that stage and ask some pretty serious questions like, Bernie, as much as I love Bernie, it's a legitimate question, and I believe it should be asked on stage. Bernie, why would you tout Russiagate rhetoric instead of addressing the obvious rigging against you by this very same party, who was the same party that scheduled 6 debates last year, but now that Hillary Clinton is running, has no problem with scheduling 12 debates or more again? Like, those are legitimate questions that I believe Tulsi Gabbard, who, by the way, called Donald Trump a bitch on Twitter, called him Saudi Arabia's bitch. I believe that Tulsi Gabbard will actually ask those tough questions. And this is from her history. She has been known to be tough. And so I think that she will begin to siphon off some progressive votes that are, if we're not talking about election justice, if we're not talking about a peace economy, being anti-war, not just when it's convenient for our mainstream narrative, but anti-war all the time, then she will get a lot of votes. Now, her and Bernie have already talked. And I can tell you right now, the gist of it probably went a little bit something like, hey, we're going to back each other no matter what. We're going to stay in this race no matter what. And we're going to make sure that no matter what happens, if we go to a contested convention, we can figure out who is the best equipped to beat Donald Trump when the time comes. And we will hand our delegates off to the other person, maybe do a VP, vice president, or president, vice president thing, maybe even make Tulsi a secretary of state, which, believe it or not, is more powerful than a vice president. I believe that secretary of state is the second most powerful person in the world because you control all the United States foreign affairs. But either way, there's been some deal discussed. They talked before she announced. And this isn't the first time they talked, by the way. But going forward, it is best that not only Tulsi, I know there's a couple of other progressives that have been announced. I know a guy named Wang or Yang is progressive, and he's about universal basic income. I believe Ojeda is another guy who's running. Some guy named Julian. I don't think he's a progressive, though. Julian is something or another. It was a big deal that he was announcing in Miami. It was on all the Spanish channels. So so they're going to try to use, it's like we already knew this was going to happen, right? They're going to use as many candidates on the Democratic establishment side to suck delegates away from the Bernie Sanders of the world, the Tulsi Gabbards of the world. And that is why we have to, in my opinion, we need to actually add more progressive faces to this election and make sure that they stay in. Now, it's easier said than done, but it's possible to be done, especially with the growing popularity of the progressive pool. So there you have it. If they don't change any rules, that's what I believe. I think it's a great thing because now Bernie has someone on his side kind of like, even though Trump started off with everybody against him, by the end of it, you saw they kind of started buttering up with Trump. They started buddying with him. So he kind of had a little bit momentum on his back by the time he started closing in towards the end of the election. And I think that's what Bernie needs as well, to push him over that hill. If he can have someone as popular as Tulsi Gabbard step up and say, this is the guy I backed before, this is the guy I'm going to back now, it does wonders for both of them. It really does. And vice versa. If Bernie Sanders gets a chance to endorse unapologetically Tulsi Gabbard over an establishment candidate, I'm sure he will jump on the opportunity, because right now it's about preserving his legacy if he doesn't win that election. Because he still has something, he has to answer for that Hillary Clinton. I know he did it because it was necessary. It was in the rules. He agreed to it via contract. I get all that. But that is not what the perception is. And the perception when it comes to your legacy and in your mandate is more important than the actuality. Unfortunately, that's just the world we live in. So love to hear your thoughts about this. Go ahead and leave your thoughts in your comments below and join us on Roku, people. If you have any other questions regarding voting and how we should go about strategizing for this election, as far as how we disseminate information and what's the important things to talk about or touch on, quick little bullet points when you're debating something, leave a comment below and let me know what your question is, and we can do a video about that as well. Thanks for watching that segment of Mi Casa es Su Casa. You can donate to our Patreon and keep helping the network grow by clicking on the link in the description below. And also, make sure you join us at JustNForm.com. And finally, make sure you subscribe to us on Roku and be part of the very first independent news network on Roku TV. But more than anything else, always remember, find your balance. Peace.